Maria Rodriguez pulled her 10-year-old Toyota Camry into the parking lot of Naval Base Coronado on a bright California morning. Her hands gripped the steering wheel a little tighter than necessary. She hadn't been on a military base in almost 3 years. The familiar sight of the guard gate, the crisp uniforms, the American flag waving against the blue sky, it all brought back memories she had carefully tucked away. She was here for one reason only. Her son, Miguel, was graduating from Navy SEAL training today. After 6 months of the most grueling military training in the world, he had made it. Her boy had become one of the elite. Maria checked herself in the rearview mirror. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore a modest blue dress she'd bought at Target last week, comfortable flats, and the small gold cross her mother had given her years ago. Nothing fancy, nothing that would draw attention. That was how she preferred it these days. She grabbed her purse and the small camera she'd brought to capture the moment. As she walked toward the ceremony area, she noticed groups of families already gathering. Wives in sundresses chatted excitedly. Fathers stood tall, many of them veterans themselves, proud to see their sons follow in their footsteps. Young children ran around in their best clothes, not quite understanding what uncle or brother had accomplished, but sensing the importance of the day. Maria found a seat in the 5th row off to the side. Perfect. She could see everything but wouldn't be in anyone's way. She settled in, watching the stage where her son would soon stand. "Excuse me, ma'am, but I think you're in our seats." Maria looked up to see a woman in her 40s, blonde hair perfectly styled, designer sunglasses perched on her head. Behind her stood a man in a polo shirt and khakis, looking impatient. "Oh, I'm sorry," Maria said, checking her ticket. "I thought this section was open seating." The woman's eyes traveled over Maria's simple dress and worn purse. "Well, this area is typically for immediate family members. The general seating is further back." "I am immediate family," Maria said quietly. "My son is graduating today." The blonde woman exchanged a glance with her husband. "Your son is becoming a SEAL?" The disbelief in her voice was barely concealed. "Yes, Miguel Rodriguez." "Rodriguez," the woman repeated slowly. "Well, isn't that nice? These programs to help underprivileged youth really do work wonders, don't they, Tom?" Her husband grunted in agreement, already looking at his phone. Maria felt the familiar burn in her chest, but she kept her voice steady. "Miguel earned his place here, just like your son did, I'm sure." "Oh, of course," the woman said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I didn't mean to imply otherwise, it's just that the SEALs are so elite. The training is incredibly demanding. Most men can't handle it, let alone boys from different backgrounds." "Different backgrounds?" Maria repeated softly. "You know what I mean, single-parent homes and all that. It must have been so hard for you raising him alone. What does his father do?" Maria stood up slowly. At 5'4", she had to look up at the woman, but something in her posture made the blonde take a small step back. "His father died serving his country," Maria said. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to use the restroom before the ceremony starts." She walked away with measured steps, hearing the woman whisper to her husband behind her. She couldn't make out the words, but she could imagine them. She'd heard variations of them her whole life. In the restroom, Maria splashed cold water on her face. Her hands were steady. They always were, even when her heart was racing. She looked at herself in the mirror and saw her mother's strength in her dark eyes, her father's determination in the set of her jaw. Both of them were gone now, but their lessons remained. "You don't need anyone's approval, Mija," her mother used to say. "You know who you are." Maria dried her face and returned to her seat. The blonde woman and her husband had moved to the row in front of her, but she paid them no attention. Other families were filtering in now. The energy was building, excitement mixed with pride and relief. These families had survived 6 months of worry, of minimal contact with their loved ones, of knowing their sons and husbands and brothers were being pushed beyond normal human limits. An older gentleman sat down next to Maria. He had silver hair and wore a Navy veteran's cap. His eyes were kind as he smiled at her. "First SEAL graduation?" he asked. "Yes, sir." "Mine too, my grandson. Proudest day of my life, and I've had quite a few proud days." He adjusted his cap. "You have a son graduating." "I do, Miguel." "Good strong name, biblical, the archangel, the warrior of God." The old man nodded approvingly. "You must be very proud." "More than words can say." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the stage being prepared. Then the old man spoke again. You know, my grandson almost quit during Hell Week. Called me at 2 in the morning, crying, said he couldn't do it. You know what I told him? Maria shook her head. I told him that the only easy day was yesterday. That's what the SEALs say. But I also told him something else. I said the strongest steel goes through the hottest fire, and sometimes the strongest people look like the most ordinary ones. He glanced at her with those knowing eyes. Your boy, he made it through that fire, says something about how he was raised, don't you think? Before Maria could respond, music began to play. The ceremony was starting. She watched as the instructors took their places on stage. These were men who had seen combat, who had served in places most Americans couldn't find on a map. Their faces were weathered but alert, constantly scanning even in this safe environment. Then the graduates began filing in. Maria's breath caught when she saw Miguel. He was thinner than when she'd last seen him, his face more angular, but his eyes were bright and focused. He moved with a new confidence, a controlled power that reminded her of a leopard. Her little boy, who used to be afraid of the dark, had become a warrior. The commanding officer, Captain James Bradley, stepped up to the microphone. He was a tall man with steel-gray hair and the kind of presence that commanded attention without effort. Ladies and gentlemen, families and friends, welcome to Naval Special Warfare Training Center. Today, we celebrate the achievement of 24 exceptional men who have earned the right to be called Navy SEALs. The crowd erupted in applause. Maria clapped too, her eyes never leaving Miguel. Captain Bradley continued. These men have completed 6 months of the most demanding military training in the world. They have been pushed physically, mentally, and emotionally beyond what most people believe is possible. Out of the 150 candidates who started this journey, these 24 remain. Maria heard the blonde woman in front of her whisper to her husband, "Thank God Tommy made it. I was so worried. You know how sensitive he can be." The captain went on to describe the training. The infamous Hell Week, where candidates go 5 days with less than 4 hours of sleep total. The dive training, where they learn to function underwater in conditions that would panic most people. The land warfare training, where they master tactics that could mean the difference between life and death. But becoming a SEAL is about more than physical strength, Captain Bradley said. It's about mental toughness, team loyalty, and an unwavering commitment to protecting our nation and the people who cannot protect themselves. As he spoke, Maria noticed one of the instructors on stage kept looking in her direction. He was younger than the others, maybe early 30s, with the kind of intense focus that suggested he was memorizing every face in the crowd. Their eyes met for a moment, and he quickly looked away. Strange, Maria thought, but dismissed it. Today was about Miguel, not about her. The individual recognition began. Each graduate's name was called, and they stepped forward to receive their trident pin, the symbol of the Navy SEALs. Families cheered as their loved ones were recognized. "Thomas Brennan," the captain called. The blonde woman in front of Maria stood up, applauding loudly. "That's my baby," she shouted. Her son, tall and lanky with his mother's fair coloring, stepped forward with a slight swagger. Maria watched the young man receive his pin. He was trying hard to look tough, but she could see the nervousness in the way he kept adjusting his uniform. He was still just a boy playing at being a man, but that was okay. The teams would finish shaping him if he had what it took to stay. More names were called. Each family's joy was palpable. Maria waited patiently, knowing Miguel's name would come soon. Rodriguez, always near the end of the alphabet. Miguel Rodriguez. Maria stood, her heart swelling with pride. Miguel stepped forward, his movements precise and controlled. When Captain Bradley pinned the trident to his uniform, Miguel's eyes found hers in the crowd. For just a moment, his military bearing cracked, and she saw her little boy's smile. Then it was gone, replaced by the serious expression of a Navy SEAL. She sat back down, wiping away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. The old veteran next to her patted her shoulder gently. "Fine-looking young man," he said. "You did good, ma'am." After all the graduates had received their pins, Captain Bradley returned to the microphone. "Before we conclude today's ceremony, I want to say something about sacrifice. These men have sacrificed to be here today. They've sacrificed comfort, safety, and time with loved ones. But they are not the only ones who sacrifice. Their families sacrifice too. Parents who worry every day their child is in training. Spouses who keep the home together while their partner is gone. Children who miss their fathers but understand Daddy is doing something important. He paused, his eyes scanning the crowd. And sometimes the greatest sacrifices are made by those we never see, whose stories we never hear. Today, we have such a person among us. Maria noticed that instructor was looking at her again. This time, he wasn't looking away. Captain Bradley continued. We talk about quiet professionals in the SEAL teams, men who do extraordinary things without seeking recognition or glory. But there are quiet professionals in all walks of life. People who serve, who sacrifice, who protect others without ever asking for thanks. The blonde woman in front of Maria was checking her phone, apparently bored now that her son had received his PIN. Her husband was already planning their dinner reservation. 20 years ago, the captain said, a young army sergeant was serving in Afghanistan. This was in the early days of the war when everything was chaos and we were still figuring out how to fight an enemy that didn't follow conventional rules. Maria's stomach tightened. No, this couldn't be about what she thought it was about. This sergeant was part of a supply convoy traveling through Helmand province. The convoy was ambushed. The lead vehicle hit an IED. Enemy fighters attacked from 3 sides. It was what we call a complex ambush, perfectly planned to cause maximum casualties. The crowd had gone completely silent. Even the children seemed to sense the gravity of the moment. The sergeant was in the 3rd vehicle. When the shooting started, most people would have taken cover and returned fire from their position. That's what they're trained to do. But this sergeant saw that the medical vehicle at the rear of the convoy had been hit. The medics were trapped inside, wounded. Without medical support, every wounded soldier in that convoy would die. Maria's hands were clenched so tightly in her lap that her knuckles were white. She kept her face carefully neutral, but inside, memories were flooding back. The heat, the dust, the sound of bullets hitting metal. So this sergeant made a decision. Under heavy fire, they left their vehicle and ran not to safety, but toward danger. 200 meters of open ground with no cover, bullets kicking up dirt all around. They reached the medical vehicle and found both medics unconscious. The sergeant pulled them out one by one, dragging them to safety behind an overturned Humvee. The old veteran next to Maria was leaning forward, completely absorbed in the story. The blonde woman had finally put down her phone. But the sergeant wasn't done. There were still wounded soldiers in the kill zone, so this 5'4", 130-pound sergeant went back, again and again. 5 times total, running into enemy fire to pull wounded soldiers to safety. On the 5th trip, they were providing cover fire for the last wounded soldier when an enemy fighter got a clear shot. Captain Bradley paused. The silence was absolute. The sergeant took 2 bullets, one in the shoulder, one in the side, just below the body armor. But they kept firing, kept protecting that wounded soldier until he was safe. Only then did the sergeant accept medical treatment. Maria could feel eyes on her now. That instructor on stage was definitely looking at her, and he wasn't the only one. 13 soldiers are alive today because of that sergeant's actions. 13 families didn't have to receive a folded flag instead of their loved one. The sergeant received the Silver Star for gallantry in action, one of the highest honors our military can bestow. The captain's voice grew softer. But here's what most people don't know. That sergeant was a single parent, had a 2-year-old son at home, could have taken a safe posting, could have requested duty that would keep them out of combat, but they chose to serve where they were needed most. Miguel was staring at his mother from his position with the other graduates. His face was a mix of confusion and growing understanding. That sergeant left the army after recovering from those wounds, wanted to be there to raise their son. Took a quiet job, lived a quiet life, never talked about what happened that day in Afghanistan. Even their son didn't know the full story. Captain Bradley looked directly at Maria now. Ladies and gentlemen, that sergeant is here today. She came to watch her son graduate. She didn't want any recognition, didn't want any fuss. She just wanted to see her boy achieve his dream. But sometimes, heroes need to be recognized whether they want it or not. Maria felt every eye in the crowd turn to her. The blonde woman in front of her had turned completely around, her mouth slightly open in shock. Sergeant First Class Maria Rodriguez, United States Army, retired. Would you please stand? Maria's legs felt like water, but she stood. Her military bearing returned automatically, shoulders back, chin up, eyes forward. What happened next would be talked about at Naval Base Coronado for years to come. All 24 newly minted Navy SEALs, including her son Miguel, snapped to attention as one. Then, in a movement so coordinated it could have been rehearsed, they saluted her. But they weren't alone. Every instructor on the stage, combat veterans with multiple deployments, men who had seen and done things that would break most people, stood and saluted. Every veteran in the crowd stood and saluted. The old gentleman next to her, tears streaming down his weathered face, stood and saluted. Even some of the civilians, not sure what else to do but understanding they were witnessing something profound, stood and placed their hands over their hearts. Maria Rodriguez, who had just wanted to watch her son graduate in peace, stood alone in a sea of respect and recognition. She returned the salute with precision, her eyes finding Miguel's. He was crying openly, not caring who saw. Captain Bradley's voice cut through the moment. "Sergeant Rodriguez, we have someone here who has been wanting to thank you personally for 20 years. A man in his 40s, walking with a slight limp, made his way onto the stage. He wore civilian clothes, but his bearing was unmistakably military. "My name is John Mitchell," he said into the microphone, his voice thick with emotion. 20 years ago, I was a private first class in Afghanistan. I was the soldier in that medical vehicle. I was unconscious, bleeding out. Sergeant Rodriguez saved my life." He turned to face Maria directly. "Because of you, I got to come home. I got to marry my high school sweetheart. I got to see my 3 daughters born. I got to coach their soccer teams and walk my oldest down the aisle last month. None of that would have happened without you." The crowd was no longer trying to hide their tears. Hard men who prided themselves on being tough were wiping their eyes. "I've been looking for you for 20 years, Mitchell continued. "The Army wouldn't tell me your name because you requested privacy after your discharge. But when I heard Miguel Rodriguez was graduating today and I learned his mother was also a veteran, I did some digging. I had to know if it was you." He walked off the stage and through the crowd toward Maria. When he reached her, he did something that broke whatever composure remained in the audience. This grown man, this combat veteran, fell to his knees in front of the small woman in the simple blue dress. "Thank you," he said. "Thank you for my life." Maria helped him to his feet, embarrassed by the attention but moved by his gratitude. "You don't need to thank me," she said softly. "I did what anyone would have done." "No," Mitchell said firmly. "You did what only a hero would do." The ceremony had taken an unexpected turn, and Maria stood frozen as John Mitchell rose from his knees. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her, but all she wanted was to disappear into the crowd. This wasn't supposed to happen. Today was supposed to be about Miguel, not about a day in Afghanistan she had spent 2 decades trying to forget. "Please," she said quietly to Mitchell, "this is my son's day." But Captain Bradley wasn't finished. He spoke into the microphone again, his voice carrying across the silent gathering. "Sergeant Rodriguez, there's more. Mr. Mitchell wasn't the only soldier whose life you saved that day." Maria's heart sank. She had specifically requested that her service record remain private when she left the Army. She had changed her phone number, moved twice, done everything she could to leave that life behind. Not because she was ashamed, but because she couldn't bear to relive it over and over. 3 more people stood up in the crowd. 2 men and a woman, all in their 40s, all wearing civilian clothes but carrying themselves like soldiers. "Staff Sergeant Robert Chen," one of them called out. "You dragged me 40 meters with 2 bullets in you. I'm alive because of you." "Specialist Sarah Warner," the woman said. "You covered me while I tried to stop the bleeding on Tommy Martinez. We both made it home because of you." "Private First Class James Thompson," the third said. "I was 19 years old, scared out of my mind. You told me I was going to make it home to my mama, and because of you, I did." Each of them made their way toward Maria. The crowd parted to let them through. Maria stood there, overwhelmed, as these ghosts from her past surrounded her with gratitude she had never asked for and never wanted. Miguel had left his position with the other graduates and was pushing through the crowd toward his mother. She saw him coming and felt a mixture of pride and something else, a fear that he would look at her differently now. "Mom," he said when he reached her, his voice cracking. "Mom, why didn't you tell me?" She looked up at her son, he had gotten so tall, when had that happened, and saw confusion in his eyes. "Because it wasn't important," she said simply. "Wasn't important?" The blonde woman from earlier had found her voice. "You're a war hero, and you're saying it wasn't important." Maria turned to face her. The woman looked completely different now, the smugness gone, replaced by something that might have been shame. "I'm not a hero," Maria said firmly. "I was a soldier. I did my job. These men and women," she gestured to the SEALs on stage, "they're doing their jobs. Some jobs just require more than others." "But you could have died," the blonde woman's husband said, speaking for the first time. "You voluntarily ran into enemy fire multiple times." Maria's eyes hardened slightly. "Every person in uniform volunteers to run toward danger, sir. That's what service means." She turned back to Miguel, whose eyes were wet with tears he was fighting not to shed. "Mijo, I need some air. Can we?" "Yeah, Mom, yeah, of course." He led her away from the crowd, his hand on her elbow, protective and gentle. They found a quiet spot near the parking lot, away from the ceremony that was slowly resuming behind them. 20 years, Miguel said. 20 years, and you never said anything. When I told you I wanted to be a SEAL, when I talked about honor and courage and sacrifice, you just smiled and nodded. You never said you knew exactly what that meant. Maria sat down on a bench, suddenly feeling every one of her 45 years. What was I supposed to say, Miguel? That I had been in combat, that I had killed people, that I had almost died? How would that have helped you? It would have helped me understand. Miguel's voice rose, then he caught himself, looking around to make sure they were still alone. "Mom, do you have any idea what this means? My whole life I thought Dad was the hero. I thought you were just... Just what?" Maria asked softly. "Just the woman who worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table. Just the mother who helped with homework and drove you to football practice." Miguel sat down next to her, his dress uniform pristine against the weathered bench. "That's not what I meant." "I know what you meant, Mijo, and it's okay. Your father was a hero. He died serving his country, and that's all that matters. But you served too. You were decorated. You saved lives." Maria was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the California sunshine that was so different from the harsh light of Afghanistan. "Let me tell you something about that day," she finally said. "Yes, I saved lives, but I also took them. I killed 3 enemy fighters that day, Miguel. 3 men who were probably someone's sons, maybe someone's fathers. They were trying to kill us, and I killed them first. That's not heroism, that's survival." Miguel was silent, processing this. Maria continued. "When I came home, when I was recovering in the hospital, all anyone wanted to talk about was how brave I was. Reporters wanted to interview me. The army wanted to parade me around as an example of women in combat. But all I could think about were the faces of those men I killed. All I could think about was how close I came to leaving you an orphan." "Is that why you left the army?" "Partly, but mostly I left because of you. You were so small, Miguel, just 2 years old. Your grandmother was watching you while I was deployed, but I knew she couldn't do it forever. And after your father died, after I almost died, I realized that being a soldier wasn't the most important thing I could do. Being your mother was." Miguel took his mother's hand. His was so much larger now, calloused from training, but he held hers gently. "I'm sorry I never asked about your service," he said. "I just assumed." "You assumed I was a supply clerk or a mechanic or something safe," Maria finished for him. "That was what I wanted you to assume. It was easier." They sat in silence for a moment before Miguel spoke again. "The instructors knew. That's why Instructor Peterson kept looking at you during the ceremony. They all knew, didn't they?" Maria nodded. "I suspected they might. The military is a small world and someone always knows someone, but I had hoped they would respect my privacy." "Are you angry?" She considered the question. "No, not angry, just exposed. I've spent 20 years being invisible, being just another mom in the crowd. It was comfortable, safe." "You were never invisible, Mom. Not to me." Before Maria could respond, they heard footsteps approaching. It was Captain Bradley, walking with the measured pace of someone who had learned not to rush unless necessary. "Sergeant Rodriguez," he said, stopping a respectful distance away. "I apologize if the recognition made you uncomfortable. That wasn't my intention." Maria stood and Miguel stood with her. "With respect, Captain, what was your intention?" Bradley was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "Your son is an exceptional candidate, one of the best we've seen in years, but he almost quit during Hell Week." Maria looked at Miguel in surprise. He hadn't told her that. "He was at the breaking point," Bradley continued. "Hypothermic, exhausted, hallucinating. The instructors were ready to pull him for medical reasons, but then he started talking. Delirious talk, but revealing. He kept saying he couldn't quit because his mother never quit, that she raised him alone, worked 2 jobs, never complained. He said if his mom could be that strong, he could make it through Hell Week. Maria felt tears threatening for the first time all day. The instructors were curious about this apparently superhuman mother, so they did some research. Imagine their surprise when they discovered that Miguel Rodriguez's mother was the same Maria Rodriguez who received the Silver Star in Afghanistan. The same Maria Rodriguez who had turned down a promotion to captain because it would have meant another deployment away from her son. "You turned down captain?" Miguel asked, stunned. Maria shrugged. "It wasn't important." Captain Bradley smiled slightly. "Ma'am, you keep saying things aren't important, but I respectfully disagree. Your son didn't become a SEAL because of his father's sacrifice, though I'm sure that played a part. He became a SEAL because he watched you show courage every single day in small ways. Getting up before dawn to work the early shift at the hospital. Going to night school to get your nursing degree. Never dadding because you were focused on raising him right." "How do you know all this?" Maria asked. "Because your son told us, ma'am, during the psychological evaluations, during the interviews. He talked about you constantly. How you taught him that strength wasn't about being the biggest or the loudest. It was about getting up every day and doing what needed to be done even when it was hard, especially when it was hard." Miguel was looking at his mother with an expression she had never seen before, a mixture of awe and understanding. "I need to get back to the ceremony," Captain Bradley said. "But before I go, I want you to know something. We've had thousands of men go through SEAL training. Some are born warriors, some are athletes looking for a challenge, some are trying to prove something to someone. But the best SEALs, the ones who last, the ones who make a real difference, they're the ones who understand that being special operations isn't about being special. It's about service. Your son understands that because you taught him." He turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Sergeant Rodriguez, there's someone else who wants to speak with you. He's been waiting 20 years as well." As Bradley walked away, another figure approached from the shadows of a nearby building. This man was older, probably in his 60s, with the kind of weathered face that spoke of decades in harsh climates. He wore a simple black suit, but Maria recognized the bearing immediately. This was a command-level officer, probably retired. "Sergeant Rodriguez," he said, his voice gravelly. "My name is Colonel Marcus Webb, retired. I was the intelligence officer for Regional Command South in 2003. Maria stiffened. She remembered that name, though they had never met in person. "Sir," she said simply. "Do you know why your convoy was ambushed that day?" Webb asked. "We were told it was random. Wrong place, wrong time." Webb shook his head. "It wasn't random. We had intelligence that the enemy was planning something big, but we didn't know what or where. So we sent out multiple convoys as bait, hopping to draw them out." Maria felt Miguel tense beside her. Her own breath caught in her throat. "You used us as bait." Her voice was dangerously quiet. "We did, and I've lived with that decision every day since. When I heard about your actions, about the lives you saved, I tried to find you. I wanted to apologize, but you disappeared after your discharge." "An apology?" Maria's voice was rising now. "You sent us into a kill zone deliberately, and you want to apologize." "Mom," Miguel said softly, but she wasn't listening. "2 soldiers died that day, Colonel. 2 good soldiers who thought they were just running a supply mission. And you knew. You knew we might be hit, and you sent us anyway." Webb didn't flinch from her anger. "Yes, I did, and those 2 deaths are on my conscience forever. But if we hadn't drawn out that cell, they would have hit a school the next week. We found the plans afterward. 300 Afghan children would have died." Maria was silent, processing this information. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Webb continued. "I'm not trying to justify what we did, but I wanted you to know that your sacrifice and the sacrifice of those who died saved hundreds of innocent lives. It wasn't random. It wasn't meaningless. It mattered." "You should have told us," Maria said quietly. "We had a right to know." "You're right, but at the time we believed that knowing would compromise the mission. Soldiers who know their bait act differently. The enemy would have noticed." "So we were expendable." "No, you were soldiers. And sometimes soldiers are asked to take risks to save others. It's not fair, it's not right, but it's necessary." Maria looked at this man who had sent her into danger 20 years ago. She thought about being angry, about raging at him for the nightmares she still had, for the scars she still carried. But then she looked at Miguel in his dress uniform, and she understood something. "My son is going to be sent into danger," she said. "Someone like you is going to make decisions that might get him killed, and he won't know why. He'll just follow orders, trust his training, and hope he comes home." Webb nodded. "Yes, ma'am, that's exactly what's going to happen. And if those decisions save lives, if his sacrifice means something, then I suppose I can live with that." She paused. "But don't ever call it necessary, Colonel. Call it what it is, the terrible price of keeping people safe." Webb was quiet for a long moment. "You're right, Sergeant, you're absolutely right." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. "This came for you about 5 years ago, but the Army couldn't locate you to deliver it. I've been carrying it ever since, hopping to find you." Maria took the box and opened it. Inside was another medal, the Distinguished Service Cross, the second highest award for valor in combat. "The review board upgraded your Silver Star," Webb explained. "It should have been the DSC from the beginning, but—" he trailed off. "But I was a woman, and it would have attracted too much attention," Maria finished. "Politics," Webb said with disgust. "But times have changed, the record has been corrected." Maria looked at the medal, then handed it back to Webb. "I don't want it." "Mom," Miguel protested. "I have everything I want," Maria said, looking at her son. "I have my boy safe and successful. I have my health. I have a good job and a quiet life. What would I do with another medal?" Webb smiled slightly. "I understand, Sergeant, but the medal isn't for you. It's for everyone else. It's so other young women in the service know what's possible. It's so your son understands the full measure of your service. And it's so the Army can finally, officially acknowledge what you did." He held the box out again. This time Miguel took it. "I'll keep it for her," he said, "until she's ready to accept it." Webb nodded. "Fair enough." He turned to go, then looked back. "Sergeant Rodriguez, I've met a lot of heroes in my career. Real heroes, not the manufactured kind. Most of them were quiet people who did extraordinary things when circumstances demanded it, then went back to being ordinary. You're one of the best of them." After he left, Maria and Miguel stood in silence. The ceremony was ending in the distance, families beginning to disperse, looking for their graduates to continue celebrating. "We should get back," Maria said. "People will be looking for you." "Let them look," Miguel said. "Mom, I need to know something. All those times I complained about things being hard, all those times I said life wasn't fair, you never once told me what real hardship was. Why?" Maria touched her son's face gently. "Because your struggles were real to you, Mijo. My pain doesn't diminish yours. My sacrifices don't make yours less important. Every generation has to find their own strength. But I could have learned from your experiences." "You did learn. You learned from watching me get up every morning and go to work. You learned from seeing me study at the kitchen table after you went to bed. You learned from watching me choose to be kind even when people weren't kind to me. Those lessons matter more than any war story." They started walking back toward the ceremony area. As they approached, Maria saw something that made her stop in her tracks. Standing in formation near the stage were all 24 newly graduated SEALs. They were at attention, facing her direction, waiting. Behind them stood their instructors, also at attention. It was clear they had been standing there for some time, waiting for her to return. "What are they doing?" Maria whispered to Miguel. Before he could answer, Instructor Peterson, the one who had been watching her during the ceremony, broke formation and approached them. He was younger than Maria had first thought, maybe late 20s, with intense blue eyes and the kind of controlled movement that suggested barely contained energy. "Sergeant Rodriguez," he said, "the teams would like to do something with your permission." "I don't understand," Maria said. "It's a SEAL tradition, ma'am. When someone has shown extraordinary valor, when they've embodied the values we try to instill in our operators, we recognize them. Usually, it's one of our own. But sometimes, rarely, it's someone from outside the teams who has earned our respect." He gestured to the formation behind him. "These men would like to perform a ceremonial recognition. It's called the Trident Line. Each SEAL will present you with their personal challenge coin. It's the highest honor we can give to someone who isn't a team member." Maria shook her head. "That's not necessary. Really, I just want to—" "Mom," Miguel interrupted softly. "Please, let them do this. Not for you, for them, for us." She looked at her son, then at the formation of warriors waiting patiently in the California sun. These men who had just completed the hardest military training in the world wanted to honor her. How could she refuse without insulting them? "Okay," she said quietly. Peterson nodded and returned to the formation. He called out in a voice that carried across the base, "Trident line, form." The SEALs moved with precision, creating two lines facing each other, creating a corridor. The instructors positioned themselves at the far end. Peterson gestured for Maria to enter the corridor. As she walked forward, the first SEAL stepped out. It was Tommy Brennan, the son of the blonde woman who had been so dismissive earlier. His mother was watching from nearby, her face a mixture of confusion and awe. "Sergeant Rodriguez," Tommy said, his voice formal but sincere. "I was raised to believe that heroes looked a certain way. Tall, strong male, you've shown me that courage comes in all forms. This is my coin. I earned it yesterday. It's the only thing of value I have to give." He pressed a heavy bronze coin into her hand. On one side was the SEAL trident. On the other was an inscription. "The only easy day was yesterday." Before Maria could respond, Tommy had stepped back and the next SEAL stepped forward. This one was older, probably in his early 30s, with weathered Hispanic features. "Ma'am, I'm Diego Morales. My mother raised me alone too. When things got hard during training, I thought about her. Now I'll think about you too. This is my coin from my first deployment to Iraq." One by one, they came forward, each with a coin, each with a story. Some were simple acknowledgments of respect. Others were more personal, young men who had grown up without fathers, who understood what it meant to be raised by a single mother who sacrificed everything for them. By the time she reached the instructors, Maria's hands were full of coins. Her eyes were wet with tears she was fighting not to shed. The lead instructor, a master chief with arms covered in tattoos that told stories of multiple deployments, was the last to approach. "Sergeant Rodriguez," he said, "I've been doing this job for 15 years. I've trained hundreds of SEALs. I tell every class that being a SEAL isn't about being the strongest or the fastest. It's about being the one who keeps going when everyone else quits. You did that in Afghanistan. You've done that every day since, raising your son. You are what we aspire to be." He handed her not a coin, but something else, a small, worn patch. It was a SEAL trident made of fabric, clearly cut from a uniform. "This was from my first combat uniform," he said. "I wore it in Fallujah in 2004. I've carried it ever since as a reminder of why we fight. I'd like you to have it." Maria couldn't speak. She just nodded, clutching the coins and patch to her chest. As the formation dispersed, families rushed in to find their graduates. The blonde woman Maria had learned her name was Jennifer Brennan, approached hesitantly. "Mrs. Rodriguez, Sergeant Rodriguez, I owe you an apology." Maria shook her head. "No, you don't." "Yes, I do. I made assumptions based on stupid prejudices. I saw a Hispanic single mother and I thought terrible things. I'm ashamed." "We all make assumptions," Maria said gently. "What matters is what we do when we learn we're wrong." Jennifer's eyes filled with tears. "My son, Tommy, his father left when he was 10. I've been raising him alone for 8 years. I know how hard it is, and I only have one child. You did it while dealing with combat trauma, wounds, and Lord knows what else. I'm in awe." "You're doing the best you can with what you have," Maria said. "That's all any of us can do." Jennifer impulsively hugged her. Maria stiffened at first. She wasn't a hugger by nature, but then relaxed into it. When they separated, Jennifer wiped her eyes. Would you like to join us for dinner? We have reservations at the Hotel del Coronado. I'd love to hear about Miguel growing up. Maybe get some advice. Tommy's going to his first posting next month, and I'm terrified." Maria was about to politely decline when Miguel appeared at her elbow. "That's very kind of you, Mrs. Brennan. We'd love to join you." Maria looked at her son in surprise. Miguel had never been one for social situations with strangers. "Great," Jennifer said. 7 o'clock, we can share embarrassing stories about our boys." As Jennifer walked away to find Tommy, Maria turned to Miguel. "Since when do you want to have dinner with strangers?" "Since I realized I've kept you isolated," Miguel said. "Mom, you never go out, you never date, you never do anything for yourself. It's always been about me." "That was my choice, Mijo." "I know, but I'm a SEAL now. I'm going to be deployed more than I'm home. You need friends. You need a life beyond being my mother." Maria wanted to protest, but she knew he was right. She had wrapped her entire identity around being Miguel's mother. Now that he was grown, who was she? They were interrupted by a commotion near the parking lot. A news van had arrived, and a reporter with perfectly styled hair was setting up with her cameraman. "Oh no," Maria muttered. Captain Bradley appeared beside them. "I tried to keep them away, but someone must have called them, probably posted something on social media about what happened. I'm sorry, Sergeant." The reporter had spotted them and was walking over with the determined stride of someone who smelled a story. "Sergeant Rodriguez, Kelly Matthews, Channel 7 News. We heard there was an amazing story here today about a female war hero whose son just became a Navy SEAL. Can we get an interview?" "No comment," Maria said firmly, turning to leave. "Sergeant, the public deserves to know about heroes like you. Your story could inspire countless young women to serve." Maria stopped and turned back. "My story is not for sale, Ms. Matthews, and inspiration doesn't come from TV interviews, it comes from actions." "But surely you want recognition for your service." "I had all the recognition I needed today," Maria said. "My son graduated, that's the only thing that matters." She walked away, Miguel at her side, leaving the frustrated reporter behind. They found a quiet spot near Miguel's barracks, where he would be staying for the next few weeks of advanced training. "You know she's not going to give up," Miguel said. "Reporters are like bloodhounds. Let her sniff around, she won't find anything. I've been very careful about my privacy." Miguel was quiet for a moment. "Mom, can I ask you something? And I need you to be honest. Do you regret your service, the things you had to do?" Maria considered the question carefully. "I regret that war exists. I regret that good people die for bad reasons. I regret that I had to kill to protect others. But my service itself, no, I don't regret that. Even though it cost you so much." "Everything costs something, Mijo. The question is whether what you gain is worth what you pay." "And was it worth it?" Maria thought about the 13 soldiers who lived because of her actions. She thought about John Mitchell's daughters, who existed because their father came home. She thought about the Afghan children who didn't die because a terrorist cell was stopped. "Yes," she said simply, "it was worth it." They sat in comfortable silence, watching other families celebrate around them. Then Miguel spoke again. "There's something else I need to tell you, about Dad." Maria tensed. They rarely talked about Miguel's father. It was an unspoken agreement between them. The past was too painful to revisit regularly. "What about him?" "I know how he really died, Mom." Maria's blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" "I mean I know he didn't die in combat. I know about the training accident." She turned to face her son. "How long have you known?" "Since I was 16. I did a school project on the War on Terror and I looked up Dad's unit. The records showed they weren't deployed when he died. They were at Fort Bragg. He died in a helicopter crash during a training exercise." "Why didn't you say anything?" Miguel shrugged. "Because I realized you lied to protect me. You wanted me to think my father was a hero who died fighting for his country, and he was a hero. Just because he died in training doesn't make his service less valuable." "I should have told you the truth." "Maybe, but Mom, I understand why you didn't. The same reason you never talked about your own service. You wanted me to make my own choices, form my own ideas about honor and duty and sacrifice." A young petty officer approached them. "Excuse me, ma'am, but Captain Bradley asked me to give you this." He handed Maria an envelope and quickly departed. She opened it to find a handwritten note. "Sergeant Rodriguez, I understand your desire for privacy, and we will respect it. However, I wanted you to know that your son's entire class has requested that you be their honorary team mother. It's not an official position, just their way of saying you represent what they're fighting for. The mothers, wives, sisters, and daughters who sacrifice so their loved ones can serve. If you're willing, they'd like you to attend their graduation from advanced training in 6 months. No publicity, no fanfare. Just a quiet acknowledgement of the bond between those who serve and those who wait. Respectfully, Captain James Bradley." Maria folded the letter and put it in her purse. "Your teammates want me to be their honorary team mother." Miguel smiled. "Doesn't surprise me. Half of them probably have crush on you now." Miguel, but she was smiling too. "I'm serious. Diego Morales asked me if you were single." "He's young enough to be my son." "He's 32, Mom. You're 45. That's not exactly cradle robbing. Maria shook her head, but she was laughing now. It felt good to laugh. She realized she hadn't really laughed in months, maybe years. We should head to the hotel, she said. I need to change.